Hi guys, my name is Ace and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Last time I made tutorial videos on how you can color grade your pictures on Capture One and how you can use different frequency separation settings for different shots. You can check out the links to those videos in the description below. So today I'll be teaching you how to do frequency separation. Let's get right into it. So I have a picture of my model here, and the first thing you're supposed to do when you're doing frequency separation, just like I discussed before in my previous video, you need to duplicate the background layer twice. Then the first layer is high frequency. You can rename the first layer as high frequency, and then the second layer as low frequency. Now you close the high frequency and select the low frequency, then filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Now you can zoom out a little bit. So just like I said in my previous video, you just need to use your Gaussian blur just to an extent where you are no longer seeing the skin textures. So that's what we'll be doing right now. And for this shot, so for this shot I'll be using, you can still see, okay, I'll be using, let me use 12 for this shot. Now you select your high frequency and open the high frequency, then image, apply image. Remember, your layer has to be low frequency. Your blending mode should be subtract, offset 128, and then scale should be 2. Okay, now you change the blending mode of your high frequency to linear light, and after that you are ready to use your mixer brush. But then before using your mixer brush, you have to select your low frequency layer. Your mixer brush is just right here, and then there's something we call mixer brush presets, and we have them here. We have the wet, load, mix, flow. So you make sure this is not checked. Make sure this particular one is checked. Then your wet should be 9%. Oh, it doesn't have to be 9%, but this is actually the preset that works best for me. So my wet is on 9%, load 75, mix is 90, and then flow is 100. So now I said it in my last video that in order to use frequency separation and get the maximum results you actually desire, you need to know and understand the human facial structure, and maybe that's the first thing I'll be explaining in this video. So we'll have to create another layer for that. Okay, so I'm going to move my model's picture from here to the other file so we can understand the okay, so I have created another file using the same image. Now if I'm talking about the facial structure, there are parts of the face that you actually need to pay attention to when you are using frequency separation. Now we have the, let me use brush tool to draw out these parts so you can get them easily. I'm using green color here. So first of all, you have the forehead, we have the cheekbones, you have the cheekbones, you have the jaw, yep, the other cheekbone, and then you have the nose. Okay, so these are the vital parts that you actually need to touch when you are doing frequency separation. And now, if you are doing frequency separation and touching these particular parts, you have to understand how you are supposed to use your brush strokes. Let me explain that better. For the forehead is like a bowl. You have to see the forehead as a bowl. I don't know. We have the bowl is supposed to look like this. So you have your highlights here. We have our midtones here, and then we have our shadows here. Let me use different colors for these stuff. Let me use the green color to draw out the highlights first. So we have our highlights here for the forehead. For the cheekbones, we have our highlights here. We have our highlights here too. For the lower jaw, we have our highlights here. So I'll be creating another layer for the midtones, and I'll be using orange color to highlight the midtones. So now from this point, we have our midtones this way. Depending on the kind of shot you are using, it is not always the same in every shot, but then you can use the lighting in the pictures to determine where is your highlights, your midtones, and your shadows. So for the cheekbones, we have the midtones here. Okay, sorry, for the nostril, we still have these highlights I didn't point out earlier. So we still have highlights here, here, and here. So back to the midtones. This whole part of the nose are basically midtones. So this whole part of her left cheekbone is midtones. We have our midtone here too, and here. And then I'll be using red to highlight the shadows. So now we have our shadow here up to this point. We have our shadow here. We have our shadow here, and the lower part of the lower jaw. Yeah, and that's it. So if you are doing frequency separation, you pay attention to the shape of the part of the face you are mixing. So when using your mixer brush, you make sure if you are doing frequency separation on the forehead, let me use a different color for this one. I'm using blue color to indicate the direction of your brush strokes when you are using your mixer brush. So if you are doing the highlights of the forehead, your brush strokes should be circular. If you are using your brush on the highlights on the forehead, you make sure your brush strokes are circular this way, and you make sure whatever you are doing here is not actually affecting the midtone. So if you are mixing the highlights, you need to focus on just the highlights. Make sure you don't drag your highlights into your midtones, or drag your midtones into your highlights. So we have this direction for your mixer brush for highlights, and then for shadows you can easily go upwards or downwards, but make sure you maintain this particular area which is for the shadows, and you can actually do the same for the other side too. Now for the midtones are generally supposed to mix your shadow and your highlights. Like midtones is the one part that actually separates your shadows from your highlights, and they are supposed to blend in. So midtones is specifically for you to mix or blend in the highlights and the shadows. So while using your midtones, you can actually increase your brush size, so you are picking a little part of your highlights and you are still picking little parts of your shadows, just to mix in the whole thing. Now if you are working on your cheekbones, the same thing. Just look at the shape of my highlights here. You make sure your brush strokes is also going this same direction too. This other side, your brush strokes can easily come this way, and then you have your midtones here. Your brush strokes can come this way or this way, and then you have your shadows here. This side is the area where makeup artists normally add their contours, so you are supposed to move your brush strokes this way. Now we have the highlights on the nose. You can either go upwards or downwards. For the wait, wetin dem dey call here? Okay, so for the tip of the nose, where we normally mostly have highlights, you are also supposed to move in circular direction, clockwise or anti-clockwise, whichever way. Then the midtones beside the highlights of the nose, then the midtones beside the highlights of the nose, you can easily go downwards or upwards. Now we have the other cheekbone here. So we have the other cheekbone here. Your brush strokes can also go this way or that way. One of the things you actually need to pay attention to also is the skin textures. When you see the skin textures, you easily know what direction you are supposed to move towards with your brush strokes. Looking at this skin texture, you can see the skin textures are more like this, so it will be very wrong for you to use your brush strokes in this direction or this direction. You have to move in accordance with the flow of the skin texture too. Now going to the jaw, we have our highlights here, so you can also move your brush strokes this way. We have our midtone here. You can move your brush stroke this way or upwards. Then we have our shadow. You can move your brush stroke this way, and way down here. I hope you guys understand what I mean by the facial structure now. So these are very important aspects of frequency separation. These other parts that I did not highlight for us, we have this here. Now your brush strokes is supposed to come this way, and from this point this way too, and then from this point you can actually move your brush strokes this way. I hope you understand. So on the lower jaw, your brush strokes can come this way and this way. Now looking at the neck, we know the neck normally has all these wrinkles now, so and they normally look like this. So automatically you can see what the texture of the neck looks like. So your brush strokes should also come this way, or your brush strokes should come left or right, you understand. So looking at the chest now, we can see this line here. This is what the skin texture of the chest normally looks like. It goes around like a necklace. So that is what your brush strokes should look like. At the same time, you either move downwards or upwards this way, just around the neck. Make sure your brush strokes is also going around the neck this way. So that will be all for this explanation on facial structure. Enter. So that will be all for the explanation on this facial structure. Now let's go back to our image. So just like I explained before, let's do the practicals. My mixer brush here. using the same settings I've been using. Now, normally the first thing we are actually supposed to do is to remove the spots. Maybe we should just do that first. Remove them first. Okay, let me quickly show you how I normally remove spots too. I use patch tool and I use spot healing brush tool. You can also use a stone and clone stamp tool, but then this is what I normally use first. When you have spots that are not too pronounced, just pimples, I use this patch tool. So let's do this. Delete contents aware. Okay. Okay, so we have these other spots on our face that are not pimples actually. So you as a photographer should avoid removing natural spots on your models' faces. Just remove the temporary stuffs like pimples and temporary scars. Okay, so I'm going to remove the place, and then beware of removing everything completely. I personally don't like having flawless pictures. We are human beings and we have all these flaws, so I'm not looking for that 100% perfection. So you don't actually have to remove every spot you see on your model's face. Let me remove this. You can actually leave some stuffs on the nose just to maintain that originality in your pictures. Let me remove this from here. So from these points we can start using our mixer brush. Let me remove these ones too. Yeah. Now, another mistake a lot of people make is that if you are doing frequency separation, you don't zoom in your pictures this way, because when you are doing frequency separation, you have to actually see what the changes look like in the whole picture entirely. You don't just focus on one part of the face and do your frequency separation, because you can't really tell if you are doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing that way. So you need to zoom out at least this way so you can see the complete face before doing your frequency separation. Now the normal step: blur, Gaussian blur. I use 12. Apply image. Layer 1. Subtract. High frequency, and the layer 1 is low frequency. Okay, so now you make sure you're actually using your mixer brush on your low frequency layer. That's where you are working on the smoothness of the image, while the high frequency, just like I said before, is the one that brings out the texture of your image. And you have done everything you need to do for the high frequency for now. Now you use your mixer brush on your low frequency. So going back to what I explained earlier on um, your brush stroke movement and direction, this is what I was talking about. So this is our highlight. So you make sure you are working on the highlights once at a time, then you are actually working on the midtones too once at a time. So avoid dragging your highlights into your midtones. Avoid doing this. You may end up spoiling the image that way. So just focus on working on the highlights. Then we have the shadow here. You can move your brush strokes this way. Have the shadow here. And then after doing this, just like I said before, the midtones is what allows you to blend the highlights and the shadow. So you can increase your brush now. Always make sure you increase your brush according to the size of the part you are mixing. Now you can see we have blended the highlights and the shadows here. So make sure you are always adjusting the size of your brush so you don't end up touching parts you are not supposed to touch. I think you can see the direction of my brush strokes, and we are good for the forehead. Then we have the cheekbones here, just like I explained earlier on. Your brush strokes is supposed to come this way, just following the structure of the face this way. Then we have our cheekbone here. We have the highlights of the cheekbones here, so as I told you before. And then we have the highlights this way. Make sure you are using this to blend the whole thing this way. Now after the highlights, we have the shadow here. The shadow is coming this way. You can see that. So we have these highlights here. We can increase the size of our brush just so we can blend these points too. Good. So we have the highlights on the nose here. You can go up or down, and here you have to go in circle. Make sure you avoid, just like I told you before, avoid dragging your midtones or shadows into your highlights. You can see that has happened here. So let me undo this. You can see that. So reduce the size of your brush so you are only working on the highlights. Now we have the midtones around the nose, up or down, up or downwards. Alright, the other side too, up or downwards. That's what you need to do. So here, then the lower part is round, so this is how your brush strokes is supposed to come. Then the other cheekbone, just like I told you before, and just like you are seeing the skin texture on these parts, can come this way. Then we have the shadow here. The shadow can then come this way, so you're actually blending the whole stuff in. Now we have the upper jaw. You can reduce your brush size, so you have the upper jaw this way. Then we have the other side coming this way. Good. Now we have the other cheekbone here. This side is the highlight, so come this way. Now you can zoom out. The cheekbone, we have the cheekbone here. This is our highlight, so clockwise or anti-clockwise, just make sure it's circular in direction. We have these shadows under her lips, so you can move this way. Just make sure you are not dragging your shadow into your highlights. So we have these points that we can use to blend in the whole thing. So you can move this way, and this is her jaw, so you can blend it in this way. Yeah, now we have the shadows here this way, and then we can take this all the way here, all the way here, here we have. All right, so we can group these two, which are the frequency separation layers, so you can like see before and after. So you have the before and after, before and after. So just by looking at your image, you can easily spot out the parts where you need to make some adjustments. Select the low frequency. I think I need to blend this area more. So whenever you are working on blending two parts, you have to make sure your brush size is big. So anytime you are trying to blend, you have to use big brush size so you can easily blend two parts together. Now we didn't touch this part, so let's do that now. This is the forehead, so this way. Make sure you're always reducing or increasing your brush size, just adjusting it to the size of the part you're adjusting. Now we have these points here, so let's blend in these points. So we have the neck, just like I stated earlier. We have the neck. You can see my brush stroke according to the texture of the part you are adjusting. Do the same thing here. Okay, and this way too. So we have the hands. The hands are usually fresh, so you don't really have to do much on the hands, but then you can do your frequency separation this way, just a little bit on the hands. Alright, so I think I need to touch the nose a little bit. Okay, so now we can see the before and after. Before, after. So another thing with frequency separation is there are normally edges the on the face, the sharp edges, just like the eyes. Avoid using your mixer brush on the eyes, on the eyebrows, the sharp parts, because what you're actually doing on this low frequency is smoothing the whole thing, and these sharp edges do not need smoothing because they are the parts that creates contrast between some vital parts of your image of the model's face. So you don't need to touch the eyes, the eyebrows with your mixer brush. You don't need to touch the nose. Those are the edges you don't need to affect with your nose, because as you are touching those places, it's making them smoother, and they are sharp edges that do not need to be smooth in any way. So you should always avoid using your mixer brush on those parts of the face. Okay, so let's see before and after again. Before and after. Now, the exact work frequency separation normally does for you is to smoothen the face and also bring out the texture. Now we have another method of doing your smoothing and also maintaining the skin textures, which is micro, dodge and burn. And in our next video, I'll be explaining in detail how to use your micro, dodge and burn. And I also do another tutorial video explaining in detail what all the components in your mixer brush settings are actually used for, and how to understand the exact way they are actually working, so you can also devise a way you can use those settings in your own favor and do a lot of things in your own way. Thank you very much, and look forward to my next video on micro dodge and burn. La 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 la. La 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 la.